It's a cool, calm night. You worked hard that day, and you feel ready for a good night's sleep. You climb into your bed and turn off the light. You notice that, considering you live alone, it's unusually quiet tonight. Ever since the death of your next-door neighbor, the loud rap music that woke you up in the middle of the night plays no more. The police were quite reliable in these parts, but you can't help but feel a little disturbed that, for all the blood that was spilled and mess that was caused, the investigators still don't seem to have a lead. You tell yourself not to worry. The community is on their toes. No sensible killer would go sneaking around this town. You lay down and close your eyes. As you drift off into sleep, a clear view of the front of your house floats into your vision. Lights off, except for the television in the downstairs window that you must have forgotten to turn off. You sit up. What kind of dream was that? No, it was more vivid, more distinct than a dream. Strange. Oh well, you think as you lay back down. Not long after you close your eyes, you get a similar vision of your front door. Again, you wake up. What's going on here? No matter. You left all your doors locked. Still, you feel a bit disturbed as you lay back down. The stairs leading up to the upstairs hallway fill your mind. The picture at the top of the staircase grows larger as you seem to be moving slowly up the stairs. You try to remain asleep, but abruptly sit up when you hear the wooden steps creak outside your door. Paranoia gets the better of you, and you pull a small pistol out of your nightstand you kept around for self-defense. Holding it doesn't seem to give you as much comfort as you thought it would. As the steps continue to creak slowly, as whatever it is slowly ascends to the hallway. You get up and poise the gun at the door. The creaking stops. A few minutes pass, and you decide that you really have gone crazy with paranoia. Now that you realize it was only your imagination, you tell yourself to go to bed and have it checked tomorrow. But what were those visions? A dream? A spiritual warning? Your own mind playing tricks on you? These thoughts pester you as you slowly close your eyes, still standing in the middle of the bedroom, facing the door. You snap awake and you aim your pistol at the bedroom door, ready to strike at any moment. From the vision you just saw, whatever's perspective you were telepathically receiving was standing right on the other side of the door. What do? How did it get in? Is this all in your head? Is it safe to return to sleep? No, then it will surely attack while you're off guard. You take a minute or so to gather up your courage and approach the door. You slowly grasp the knob, turn it ever so softly, then you kick the door open and pull the trigger. Or so you almost do, until you realize there's nothing out there but a dark hallway. That was close. You almost caused a huge ruckus in the neighborhood, the last thing you needed for all this stress. You take a deep breath to regain composure. Close your eyes. Stretch your tense muscles. And you see yourself from behind, staring out into the hallway. It is the 9,850th day of his imprisonment. He does not know this, for he has no means of keeping track. He looks around at his fellow slaves, their eyes lifeless, their spirits broken. He goes through his daily rituals. He screams endlessly. He begs for escape. He thrashes and beats against the wall surrounding him. He screams at his captors. They smile and turn away as the sun sets. Night falls over his concrete prison. His captors have gone, and he still screams. He is the only one who still screams. It is the 9,851st day of his imprisonment. He has been denied food privileges. His stomach's rumbles intensely vibrate through his concrete prison. He refused to obey his captors. They always responded like this. He would either submit or starve to death. He wondered which option was worse as he went through his routines with an empty stomach. He wondered if he would miss the other slaves. He wondered if they would miss him as the echoes of his screams resonated with the growling of his stomach. It is the 9,852nd day of his imprisonment. A fellow slave has attacked him again. Bits of torn skin lie on the concrete floor as he bleeds from a fellow slave's barrel bite. He wonders why they lash out at him. He wonders if they resent him for his screaming, for not simply giving in already. He knows why the slave bites him. They do not speak the same language. They cannot communicate their frustrations and instead turn on each other violently. The other slave is denied food privileges, only fueling the frustration. He wonders if this is the captor's intention. He screams this night out of anger in lieu of his normal desperation. It is the 9,853rd day of his imprisonment. It is the day of retribution. For as much as he screams, as much as he resists, his captors do not seem to mind his torment. 27 years of burning hatred of the repetitive, mindless paces he takes around his prison, of the routine of endless screaming. At long last, he has isolated a captor. He lunges at her with unfathomable speed. He grabs her arm and yanks her into the prison. He begins to violently disembowel her, thrashing, yanking at hair and flesh. It has been a long time since he has had this taste in his mouth. The crystal blue water churns red with the orca trainer's blood, and SeaWorld visitors and staff panic as her lifeless body is circled by the drooping dorsal fin of the 12,000-pound feral slave. A man in the baseball cap walked through the hardware section of Home Depot. Something was wrong. He had to fix it when he got home. It was a little stuffy in there. Might feel good to let some air in. He thought for a while. The hacksaw would probably take too long. It would be a weird angle for the Phillips head screwdriver. He had tried the hammer, but couldn't get it to work, even with the 4-inch hot-dip galvanized nails he bought yesterday. It was an old place. Solid construction, over 40 years old. His eyes wandered over to the power tool section. That might do the trick. He just wanted to fix it up a bit. The ventilation wasn't right. After some inspection, the man purchased an electric drill with a 7-piece set of rapid load masonry bits, 3,000 RPM, 98.7 foot-pounds of torque, 2 batteries, and a charger. He paid in cash, thanked the cashier, and drove home. As the clock hit 1:47, he figured he'd give it a go. He didn't know if the batteries were fully charged or not, but figured a few minutes of juice would be enough. Besides, he was getting a headache, and he wanted to get this done before the kids came home. The man sat down at the dinner table and loaded the drill with a battery and a 17 by 64 masonry bit. He wasn't sure what size to use, so he guessed he could start low and size up. But it didn't really matter anyway. After removing the baseball cap, the man pressed the electric drill to the left side of his head and squeezed the trigger. The drill made a loud grinding sound as the bit struggled to pierce his skull. 2-3 minutes later, it was done. The man pulled the drill from his skull. Little flecks of bone were stuck to the bit. It felt like a slight wind was blowing through his head. He sat there for a moment, smiling. It felt good to let some air in, but now it was time to take care of that leak. I've never liked children. I never really knew why. I have seen them so many times. I decided to contemplate it for a while. I think it stems down to innocence. Not that I'm jealous of their innocence, but rather that I pity them for it. Children are full of potential. They could grow up to be anything they want until life sets in and society crushes their spirits. Their dreams become splintered, their hopes broken into shards. At a young age, they're encouraged to be individuals, to be unique, march to the beat of their own drum. Then, as they get older, they're told to be a team player, or basically, another cog in the machine that is society. And those who don't submit get left behind, shunned for not trying to subvert their true selves. They're the ones I tend to see sooner than they would expect. I'd say it'd be easier if the elders would be upfront about these things and not feed them false delusions, but I can't back that up. I think they give them these lies so they don't give up so easily. When I look at children, I see disappointment and anguish. Obviously not at that present moment, but rather their reaction when social protocol dictates they abandon their identity. Now, I understand that people's lives never turn out the way they thought it would. That doesn't bother me. In fact, at this point, I feel it should be anticipated. I just think they shouldn't be left with these delusions about destiny. It's strange that one would pity such a small creature, but I suppose I just have a soft spot for the blind and weak. When people see me, they often think of me as melancholy and depression. They think I don't like my job and that I'd rather switch to a different path. They are right. I'm rather sullen, but not because of the job I do. Rather, it is the feeling I get when I meet people while doing my job. I just see the disappointment in their eyes, yet there is little I can do to help them. I've tried consoling them, easing the disappointment of the path they chose. But it never seems to work. I see children grow into adults where they become depressed and broken. When they do meet me, they usually have little to say. It's always, I need to get something done, or I'm not quite ready. It's hard when I look into their eyes as they say, Azrael, can't I just have a little more time? It makes me shed a tear or two, sigh, and lower my scythe. No matter how much I pity them, seeing their lives go unfulfilled, I always have to say, no. Man, they almost make it sound noble. That's what I thought as I scrolled through the About section of idelord.com, a site based in China, I believe, that sold fake ID like hotcakes. It was surreal looking at something like this, a place that sold phony driver's licenses to kids with inspiring sales copy. I was 18 at the time, and 4 of my friends and I wanted to get one of those group deals on fakes. $60 per person, something like that. If you went solo, it was north of 100, and since all of us were on board, we thought, what the hell? After doing some research on more shady sites on how best to concoct the info on your fake, I was ready to place my order. Step 1. Use your real first name, but a fake last name. This means that a bouncer won't toss you to the curb after your friends have been calling you Jake the whole time in line, even though the name on your ID says Fabio or some shit. The fake last name. Well, come on. No need to explain the reasons for that. My real name is Jake Dalton, so I use the name Jake Norman on my fake ID. Step 2. Use the age 21. Though it's generic, it's a common age, and there are lots of people who are in fact 21. No need to stretch your age. Step 3. Your picture. Make sure there's even lighting. I actually once knew a guy who got busted because, on his ID photo, half his face was covered in shadow. He had no idea. And why would he? He was a stupid 16-year-old. Step 4. The signature. Just make it look like you're not in kindergarten. Oh, and make sure it's the fake name you came up with, and not your real name. Step 5. The address. This trips some people up. Some people make up a completely fake address, but then they don't remember it when a suspicious bouncer asks them. Instead, use your actual house number so you can remember it. then make the street a fake one and change the state to whichever state your ID says. Okay, easy enough. So I got my fake in the mail, checking the mailbox profusely over the next couple of weeks to make sure my parents didn't intercept my package. And it looked great. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and my fake ID was a Tennessee driver's license, the state which borders mine. I live at 308, so the address on my ID was a place in Tennessee called 308. Easy to remember. My friends and I, or should I say Jake Norman, had a blast that Friday night. We got past bouncers, bought cases of beer, got into bars, and did shots with our cash tips we had gotten at work. It was great. My friend Sammy and I were chilling the following day, Saturday afternoon. We were sort of hungover and a bit bored, just watching YouTube videos and reading stuff on forums. As we went through 4chan, we came to find that there was a thread for ID Lord, the site we got our fakes from. We decided to click on it to see how other folks got on with their fake ID experiences. There were little minor complaints. The UV is a little high, or the signature looks stretched. But there were glowing reviews too. And then we came across something that was a bit odd. There was a subthread titled, "The address I made up for my ID is a real address." Anyone else notice this? What followed were a half-dozen comments claiming the same thing. Naturally, Sammy and I went and looked up the address I had made up. There it was on Google Maps, 308, and in Tennessee, no less. We thought maybe ID Lord used real addresses for realism, but surely that be illegal. I'm no law student, but that seemed like a form of impersonation. But there was one thing that really caught our attention. A few of the commenters claimed that the buildings had money stashed in the floorboards. Lots of it. People came up with theories as to why this might be. The most convincing was that the places were drug houses used by the same cartel that sold the fake ID. Well, being broke high schoolers, Sammy and I were soon en route to the address, which was only a few hours from my house. It was sunset by the time we arrived. The place was a 2-story home in the hood, with a chain-link fence surrounding the property. A large oak tree stood in the backyard, looming over the house, as if to protect it. Beyond that were some woods that stretched on into the next neighborhood over. Sammy and I got out of the car and headed for the property. The chain-link gate creaked as we opened it and stepped through. We walked across the overgrown, dandelion-filled grass, went up the doorsteps, opened the screen door, and knocked. No answer. We knocked several more times, and still no answer. "Dude," said Sammy, "let's go in and look for the money." "Hell yeah," I replied. We went inside. The place had furniture in it, and it seemed as though someone might still be living there. But everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, and we were never more than 3 feet from a cobweb, so we were fairly certain the house hadn't been lived in. Still, we had our doubts. "I don't know, man," I said. "We might be trespassing." "Look," said Sammy, "I ain't passing up on a boatload of money. Let's tear this place up, find it, and get out of here. No one's lived here for years." Look, Sammy ran his finger across a mantle, displaying the wad of dust that had snowballed onto his fingertip. "See?" he said. Yeah, I replied. "All right, let's get to it." We tore the place up, threw couch cushions, rummaged through drawers, peeled away mold, put holes in the walls. It was dark now, and we were about ready to give up and just go home. That's when we heard something. It sounded like a television. "Shit, dude," I said. "Is that a damn TV?" Sammy and I stared at each other with our jaws agape. Our shocked, open mouths were pits of darkness. Our eyes were bugs' eyes. The sound was coming from upstairs. "You think someone just left it on?" Sammy asked, stupidly. "Oh my God, dude," I sighed. "We're screwed. It's probably some old person who can't hear a thing. Only one way to find out." Sammy and I crept up the stairs. Each step creaked, and each time it did, we winced like we had been pinched. Whatever was playing on the TV was a commercial, but I was pretty sure it was a super long infomercial, because it sounded like the same voice had been talking for the past few minutes. We got to the top step, and I, at the forefront, peeked around the corner and gazed down the dark hallway. The hall stretched for about 20 feet, and there was a door at the end. Blue light flickered beyond it. "The TV, I presume?" I whispered. Sammy and I crept down the hall. "Excuse me?" I called. Sammy shushed me and slapped my shoulder as his eyes went wide. "The hell you doing?" he hissed. "We're really sorry for being here," I said, ignoring Sammy. "We thought the place was empty. We got the wrong house," and my voice drifted off as we listened for a response. Nothing. We arrived at the end of the hall and pushed the door open. The room was empty, but it was what played on the TV that was truly haunting. It was an OxyClean type infomercial with some guy shouting at the camera in an excited way. At ID Lord, we value you, the salesman shouted. You get to create a new you that is of legal age. A you that gets to party with the adults, get into clubs, or order a beer at your favorite bar. Get together for a group purchase and get 50% off. Sammy and I looked at one another with big eyeballs. What the hell? I asked. Let's go, said Sammy. This is. We turned around, and there he stood. Or should I say, there I stood. It was me. Even in the shadows, I could see that it was me that stood across from us. Either I had a twin, or something had occurred that was beyond my comprehension. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. I went into a state of paralysis by fear. Me, the other me, wore the same clothes he'd been wearing in my fake ID photo. The hair was the same too. Something else matched. The facial expression. When I had gotten my photo taken, I gave a little half smile. That was the expression the other me had plastered to his face. Unmoving, unblinking, not even a twitch. Who are you? I said. Still holding the same facial expression, the other me spoke. You know who I am. You're me. No, you're Jake Dalton. Yeah, I'm Jake Norman. I was gonna pay you a visit tonight. But it looks like you came to me. Before Sammy or I could do a thing, Jake Norman lunged for Sammy. My evil clone pounced on him like a tiger and bit into his neck. My God, the gargling noise that erupted from Sammy's throat, that mix of screaming and bubbling blood. Sammy, I shouted. I tried to pull Jake Norman off of him, but the clone was firm as a statue. Pulling on him was like trying to uproot a tree from the ground. I backed away and got ready to run, just as the clone lifted his blood-stained head and glared at me. I shrieked and booked it toward the stairs. I glanced over my shoulder, just in time to see the other me roll onto his back, prop himself up, and proceed to spider walk after me. I flew down the stairs. The other me did that freaky spider walk down the steps, faster than any human could go in that position. I yanked open the door, ran to my car, and hopped in. As I put the key in the ignition, Jake Norman slammed his face up against my window and pressed it to the glass, hissing as he ran his tongue along its surface. I started up the car and sped away. I went to the police immediately. I told the cops to go to the house and they'd find his body. When they did, they found nothing. Not even a bloodstain. I was suspected for Sammy's disappearance. I was eventually exonerated, but everyone still looks at me like I did it. I know what they're all thinking. That I'm a murderer. I think I'm gonna have to move, probably to another state. But those are the least of my worries. Jake Norman is still out there. And by God, he's coming for me. I know, sooner or later, he will come looking. And he will find me. Fact is, I would have been better off in prison. Hi. No, you're not late at all. Please come in. Say, don't I know you from somewhere? You're one of those pretty famous reporters, right? You seem really familiar. Can I get you some tea or coffee? Or would you rather get on with the interview? Sorry, I don't know how this works. I've never been interviewed before. I pretty much shut myself off from the press after those kids went missing. I didn't need that kind of attention. I suppose I'll start my story by setting the scene. The village of Turgalwyn is pretty quiet nowadays. It wasn't always so. Back in the 90s, the mayor was given a government grant to build a new school which would cater for all the small towns and hamlets in the surrounding valleys. I was fresh out of university back then, just finished my training to become a teacher, and eager to start my first professional job. So I was thrilled to be offered a place at the Turgalwyn Infant School. I could finally prove myself by doing something I loved. The dolls changed all that. A thick fog had rolled over the mountains and was dribbling down into Galwyn Valley, clinging to the top of the lake and probing at the town with slim tendrils carried on a light winter breeze. The school bus had already arrived, and the children were lining up to go inside, shivering in their anoraks and school jumpers. I skimmed the register and noted that all were present, except for a 5-year-old boy called Gavin Lewis. His photograph, a gap-toothed boy with straw-colored hair, grinned up at me from the paper. Reassuring myself that attendance could not always be perfect, I ushered my class indoors and, shooting one last, hopeful glance out into the white-tinged street beyond the railings, shut the door behind me. My first lessons went well. An introductory session to allow the kids to settle in and make friends on their first day, and then a reading group. The Hungry Caterpillar was a huge success, and the children left to change for gym in their respective changing rooms. I wandered outside. It was pretty chilly, and I was just debating whether or not to hold the class indoors when I heard it. A hollow, rattling noise. "Hello?" I called. There was no reply, but I followed the sound to the playground gate, which backed onto the main road out of town. There was a little doll tied to the bars. I regarded it for a moment, a slightly misshapen object with a wool body and a face made from some kind of white ceramic material. A tangle of gaudy yellow thread was attached to its head, and the face had a disturbingly vacant, gap-toothed smile. The face of little Gavin Lewis came to mind, and I unhooked the doll from its string gibbet. It felt odd as I turned it over in my hands, heavier than it should have been, and solid beneath the soft exterior. I took it back to the empty classroom and examined it further. There was a seam up the back, which seemed deliberately loose. I tugged at it, and the doll just fell apart in my hands. Bones, small and dry, spilled out onto my desk with a clatter which echoed the noise of running feet outside the door. I pulled my jacket over the mess, just as the classroom was suddenly filled with excited children, ready to play outside. My heart was pounding, and, despite the cold day, I realized that I was sweating. What the hell had I just found? "Children," I shouted. "We're going to have gym class indoors today, okay?" This was met with a chorus of disappointed groans, but no objections, and they filed through into the gym hall. I arranged for one of the other teachers to keep an eye on the class, then hurried to the staff room. I found the number for Gavin's parents in the school's register and dialed it. No answer. I left an urgent request for his mother to contact me, then went to tell the headmistress. I showed her the bones, and she went white. "Are they human?" she asked. I told her I had no idea. After a moment's deliberation, we phoned the police. The first officer to enter the room recoiled at the sight. "Lord above," he cried. His colleague turned one of the larger ones over in his hands. They're chicken bones, he told us. I asked him if he was sure, and he told me that he'd grown up on a farm and was therefore well acquainted with animal bones. What happens now? Asked the headmistress. It's obvious that this is some kind of threat, or at the very least, a sick joke. The men gathered up the remains of the doll and took some of Gavin's records. I was assured that they would keep an eye on the school. True to their word, another patrol car pulled up outside the gates, just as the first one left. Strangely enough, the rest of that day was fairly normal. The kids cottoned on to the mute horror being displayed by their teachers, but aside from a general air of nervousness, the schedule proceeded as normal. Eventually, the school day ended, and parents, unaware of the eerie happenings, arrived en masse to collect their children. Those left caught the bus home. We did our best to make sure that everyone got away okay, but were wary about telling anyone what had happened. We didn't want to panic, especially when we didn't know what was going on yet. I was told that the police would call me in the morning to take a statement and that I should go home. The next morning, I checked my phone, but there was nothing from the police. I suppose I was not really surprised. This was 1998, post-Stephen Lawrence inquiry, so the police reputation throughout the UK was at an all-time low. Such an oversight was definitely possible in my book. I waited for an hour, but figured that if they desperately needed to contact me, they could phone the school. I arrived a little later than usual, actually meeting some of the children as their parents dropped them off. This, coupled with the patrol car now parked on the corner, reassured me for a time. It took me 15 minutes to realize that the bus had not arrived. The playground was almost empty in comparison with the previous day. I put the few kids present to work on some story writing and phoned the bus company. No, they hadn't heard from the driver. He was probably just caught in traffic on his way through the next town along. Yeah, right. I felt ill. Something awful had happened to those children. The crushing pain of guilt hit me then. I should have warned the parents the day before. I needed air, and I stumbled into the playground. I heard it then. The faint rattling sound. I can only describe it as like that of a bead curtain swaying in the wind. On autopilot, nausea forgotten, I wandered to the gate. Along the fence, in neat rows of identical gibbets, hung 32 little dolls. I didn't need to look at the register. I've always been good with faces. The children smiling up at me from their desks the day before were smiling at me now, faces frozen and an elation. There was something off about their eyes, though. Painted in detail on the ceramic heads, the eyes told a different story. Fear, pain, and anguish registered in their expressions. Everything is a bit of a blur after that. I remember hammering on the window of the police car outside. It was about then that I saw the dolls inside, slightly larger than the child dolls, and dressed in immaculate little police uniforms, complete with crude yet shiny epaulets. I slammed the classroom door behind me, and no longer caring whether the children knew something was up, began to cry. What the hell had I done to deserve this? I must have passed out at some point, because I woke up on the bean bags in the reading room with a doctor taking my pulse. I tried to speak, but my voice was a hoarse whisper. The man reassured me that the children had been taken home and that the school was closed. More patrol cars were arriving by that time. They rolled out the crime scene tape, and I think I heard a helicopter going by. I was obviously in no fit state to give an interview, but I managed to tell them everything I knew before I was taken to hospital to be treated for shock. As they escorted me to a waiting ambulance, a reporter shoved a camera in my face and tried to take a photo. A policeman shoved him back as he did so, and I was shut inside the vehicle, away from prying eyes. That almost concludes my part in this story. I quit my job and didn't leave my house for weeks following the incident, with one exception. It had been raining, and the fog outside seemed to have all but been washed away. I was listening to the local radio station when they began to jabber about a supposedly important update in the missing children case. Hikers had found the school bus, empty but intact, part way up a nearby mountain. Police were said to have closed off a nearby farmhouse and barn and weren't letting anyone through. Needless to say, I made my way up to the house. The area was heavy with reporters, and even as I parked, TV crews were setting up for the midday news bulletins. Another thing that I noticed were the chickens, several hundred, at least, roaming apparently wild all over the compound. A uniformed officer abruptly halted my advance, blocking the garden gate. Over his shoulder, I glimpsed forensics teams moving into the house. What the hell had they found in there? Sorry, mate. Crime scene. You're not allowed in. Please, I said. You don't understand. I need to know what's happened. We'll tell the press in good time, but for now, I'm going to need you to get back to the cars. I went home, but kept the television on. For most of the day, they just repeated the same arbitrary details: that the house was unoccupied, that no arrests had been made, and the like. That evening, however, things changed. They played a short clip, which looked to have been shot from a mobile phone, allegedly leaked footage. The cameraman is standing in a narrow hallway, which ends with a downward staircase. He then descends into the darkness, and for a moment, it looks as though the clip has ended on a black screen. Suddenly, a dim electric light snaps on and reveals a basement area with damp stone walls, floor, and ceiling. He pauses and lets the camera pan over the area. The entire room is filled with strings of what appear to be white beads on strings, as tall as the wall. The camera zooms in, and the beads become bones. But these aren't just chicken bones. They're not broken up into fragments like the bones in the dolls. It's clear what they are, and I suppress the urge to vomit. Finger bones. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, of tiny finger bones dangling from strings like a macabre curtain. The cameraman mumbles some horrified curse, and the video ends abruptly. I went up there the other week. I just got your email asking to do the interview, and it got me thinking. It's been so many years, and I wanted to see for myself. I know, it's breaking and entering, but come on. I had to know what it was like. Perhaps the police missed something. They never caught anyone, and nobody ever found the rest of the remains. So in a way, I was helping the investigation. It's not like anyone goes up there anymore. The boards across the doorframe were rotten through, and it was fairly easy to crowbar my way inside. They cut the power a few months after it happened, so I had to rely on my torch, which narrowed my search considerably. I did find something, though. I'm guessing that they never searched that coal shed behind the house. It was another cellar area, cramped and containing just a workbench and a few barrels of chicken feed. I pried one of them open and poked at the stuff inside with my crowbar, ordinary feed mixed with a powdery white substance. I glanced over at the desk, at which sat a mortar and pestle. Inside, what appeared to be a half-ground bone, though human or chicken, I could not say. I was about to leave and to run to the authorities when I saw the files under the workbench. Generic, plastic sleeves for keeping documents safe from the elements. They were dated, one every 5 years, with the earliest being in the mid-1970s and the latest being dated in the 1990s. I flipped the latter open and tipped its contents onto the tabletop. Photographs. Photographs of children in a playground, apparently taken from inside a car. Near the back of the pile, there was a picture of two police officers in a patrol car, oblivious to the presence of the photographer. The final picture. The final picture was of me. Not just any picture, though. I remembered exactly where I was when it was taken, blurred by movement and partially obscured by the hand of a police officer shoving the photographer away. I could just about make out myself being bundled into the ambulance. There was one other object in the folder, a doll. It was only half finished. The face had not yet been completed, and one of the arms had not yet been fully attached. The resemblance was uncanny, however. Everything was familiar, from the brown suit right down to the stupid teddy boy hairstyle which I had in the 90s. The doll was me. No, not at all. I was glad to help. I guess sometimes we get over events by reliving them enough times. I just hope I don't get in trouble for the break-in part. You won't publish that, right? Good. What's that? A fresh photograph of me? Sure, yeah. Go ahead.